Hey folks, it's Joe. If you're a regular listener of the Trap Set, you might remember my conversation with drummer and chef Brooks Headley, proprietor of Superiority Burger. Brooks executed an incredibly ambitious vision of bringing vegan, sophisticated, affordable food to the masses. As somebody who grew up in the restaurant business, I've spent a lot of time in kitchens, and I can say firsthand that restaurant workers are among the most hardworking, community-oriented folks I've ever encountered. Because of the current crisis, Superiority Burger, like many restaurants, was forced to shut down temporarily. If you have the resources, please consider donating to the GoFundMe set up to help the staff of the restaurant through these difficult times. Thanks. This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During this time of social distancing, we're recording conversations remotely and releasing daily episodes. Today's guest is Chad Clark, a DC-based artist best known as the driving force behind the bands Beauty Pill and Smart Went Crazy. Chad's also recently become active as a film and TV composer. We've been friends for over 20 years, and Chad's been a positive presence in my life as an artist and as a person. He spoke to me from his home in DC.
Hello?
Hi, Chad. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm feeling fine.
So it's like just 2 p.m. over there.
Correct.
Yeah. Just want to make sure time still works the normal way in the post-virus age.
I don't think the clocks have been infected yet.
Yeah, well, it's only a matter of time.
I think the clocks are what are conspiring against us. Nature is conspiring against us because it's trying to wipe the blight off of the surface of the planet.
I mean, there are a lot of, on the real, like there are a lot of it's a genuinely frightening and bizarre time. Like I can't leave my house. I know that most people can't leave their house, but I really can't leave my house. Like I won't make it if I leave my house.
Right, because you're immunocompromised because you had a virus that attacked your heart years ago, and you've had to have surgeries. Well, tell me exactly what happened before. Give me your medical history.
It's kind of long, but I will say, about a little more than 10 years ago, I had a virus that went into my heart. I didn't know what was happening to me at the time. My symptoms manifested as really extreme flu symptoms. Like I was on the couch the way that you are when you have the flu. Like I had a super headache, and everything hurt, and I was super, like, it was, snotting everywhere. It was like a really nasty flu, coughing, and I didn't actually have any actual, it wasn't like any kind of, like, it was actually infecting my heart. But I didn't know that. I thought I just had a really, really bad flu. And the way that, to summarize it, the situation, the body does not expect the body does not expect infection in the heart. You can get an infection in your liver, you can get an infection in your lungs, you can get an infection in your muscles, and almost everywhere in your body. And there are defenses and mechanisms to respond to that. But the heart almost never gets infected by a virus or bacteria. It's very, very rare, and it's usually very swiftly fatal. It usually kills you in fast. Um, and I got to the emergency room, and uh, long story short, they ended up realizing that my heart had become infected and that I was gonna die, and uh, I had emergency surgery um, to deal with the problem, basically. And it saved my life. It was open heart surgery, which is really intense. When you have open heart surgery, it's pretty nasty. I don't know if it's the kind of thing, like, I don't know that anybody wants to hear it on a music podcast, but they break your fucking rib cage open. They crack you open like a crab, and it's very painful.
I'm going to get some barbecue for dinner tonight.
Oh man, it's really painful, and it takes a long time to recover. I was young and I was relatively fit when this happened. Um, so I did better than I mean, if this happens to an older person, it is really hard to survive in a very painful experience. Uh, and when I was in a cardiac wing, you're in a wing with a lot of people who have more typical heart disease, where they maybe ate too much pizza in their life and they're having, cardiac problems because of that. That was not the nature of my particular illness, but I was in the same, I had a lot of the same, certainly the same doctors and a lot of the same kind of struggles to make my heart better. Uh, and I ultimately I recovered and kept making music, um, some of which has just gotten released. Um, excuse me. In we just released the soundtrack to a play that we scored in 2010. Uh, Around, shortly after I was recovering from my surgery and from my illness,
Which is
I scored
called?
the soundtrack is called "Sorry You're Here," and it's the soundtrack to a play which was called Suicide.Chat.Room, and it's a very intense play. They just revived it for its 10th anniversary. Actually, it ran for a couple weekends about a month ago, uh, and it's a very intense play. Um, that's about that is actually the script is synthesized from actual transcripts from Usenet groups of the internet, the early internet, like the '90s internet, before Facebook, before almost all the things we now think of. I mean, before Google, you know, um, uh, uh, Usenet's groups for support groups for people who were suicidal, and these were groups that were not. This is an important part of the play, and this is really dark to contemplate. These were not support groups that would try to discourage you from killing yourself. These were support groups to help you kill yourself. And the transcripts are very upsetting to hear, And the play is, as I said, uses real verbatim, real suicidal people's real words. It's very daring. Play directed by Marcus Kidd uh, of the Taffety Theater Group in DC, and it's a pretty upsetting and provocative play, and it was pretty intense for him to ask me to make music for it. Shortly after I had nearly died myself. You know what I
Right.
mean?
So how did it change your reflections on life and death as somebody who had just fought for his life while scoring something about people who don't want to live anymore?
I mean, look, I am I'm very, very I am and I was very empathetic to people who find themselves in moments of acute despair. I have been in moments of acute despair myself, and not on just one occasion. I've definitely experienced that kind of ideation, uh, and I mean, I felt it. I feel like the music. I'm gonna be real. Like I think the music. I feel like in the music, you can hear that I'm taking this project fucking seriously. Like I did not. I didn't see it as a small kind of um, minor local theater project that like I took that play very, very seriously, and I poured my heart into that music. And when I say pour my heart, I realize that that's sounds ironic for someone who had just had a viral attack in their heart. Um, but yeah, it was weird because I was in this mode where I was so grateful to be alive, so grateful. I couldn't believe I was alive. I was so happy about it and so ecstatic to try new things and make a fresh start. And here I am working on this play that is people who are in the opposite mode in their life. And so there was a little bit of irony or contrast. It was a very interesting time. I feel like the music benefits from all of these sort of tensions. And I stand by the record. I feel like it's a good record. And I want people to hear it. And Taffety has released it as an album 10 years after we originally did it, and I feel like you can hear I don't know, you can hear the level of emotional investment in it, and I think there's some innovative things about it, and I'm
It's
proud
very
of it.
futuristic.
I here's my thing about that. Like as you know, like you, I'm like a DC that punk and essentially, um, and a lot of I got into messing around with technology before I got sick. Beauty Pill made a song called "And the Word," which used a lot of software that was new to me at the time. Particularly a piece of software called Reactor, Reaktor, they still make today. Very sort of arcane um, and complex and sort of uh, mysterious, interesting sort of. I don't even know how to describe Reactor. I don't. I Reactor is so wild that I still, as long as I've been using it, am still always discovering new things about it, um, and I still feel like I can't quite control it, and I don't really understand it. But I was then really falling into it. I got really into it, and it was exciting to me to get away from guitar, bass, drums, and rock and roll, and to try something different. Uh, and I've always been interested in other textures. I used to produce records a lot for other bands. I produced the Dismemberment Plan records, and I think you can, if you listen to certainly the later period, Dismemberment Plan records, you can discern my, my presence or my sensibility. I like messing around with sound a lot. And so anyway, to get back to Sorry You're Here, I feel like it was the most, it was the least rock thing that I had ever done. And I was a little bit uneasy about it at the time because there was not a lot of direct support here, at least in the DC, amongst my peers here in the DC, post-punk music scene. Not everybody was psyched about me taking this direction. And the word we had put up on MySpace. Nobody remembers MySpace, but it was a pretty big site for a while, where bands would, it was kind of how you would learn about bands. And we put "And the Word" up on MySpace. It's a 6-minute long, slow, Japanese sounding, uh, melancholic. I don't even know how to describe it as a piece of music, but it certainly sounded nothing like anything I had done before or anything that I knew at that time. Now I can, with some distance, I can hear people compare it to Ryuichi Sakamoto, and I understand why they do that, because it's sort of lushly romantic and Japanese sounding. But in my own little world, "And the Word" was not a hit. People were not psyched. It was like I was getting feedback from around the world, but not necessarily in my own immediate community. And, Ian Mackay, someone who is incredibly important to me and has been a major source of emotional and every type of support you can imagine. He made a lot of jokes about my getting into technology, and there was a lot of ribbing about it. Ian's, I think, stance at the time was, I think one of his statements was that technology is this sort of drug that everyone is on. Everyone's getting high on technology. And
Yeah, I've heard him say that recently.
yeah, I mean, that's sort of his take on things. And that guy is, I cannot, I mean, I can't emphasize how much I respect him, but I disagree with him quite a bit in many different things on many different things. And my interest in technology was not one that he was necessarily, it's not that he was discouraging. He sort of was, he had a sense of humor about it, and he was sort of mocking me. But in general, I didn't get a lot of direct encouragement. It was a very strange time because the song was streamed like 100,000 times on MySpace. It was as I probably still the widest audience or whatever that I've life. And but my friends weren't that into it. But Marcus Kidd, who directed Suicide Chat Room, he was into it, and he was very excited by it. And it's why he asked me to score the play. He was like, I would like for you to do more music like that. And so when I got out of the hospital, he was like, I'm doing this play, and it's going to be provocative, and we're trying some new things. And the play is about technology and loneliness. And when I think of technology and loneliness, I think of "And the Word." And I'm curious what would happen if you score this play. And so I really leapt into it, but I had no anticipation of releasing it as a record in terms of like something that could be globally accessible. I didn't have the confidence at that point. And that's why
Because
that
all of the
record,
people in your life were mocking you?
And look. I don't want to I don't want to over dramatize it. It wasn't this extreme kind of mocking. It was just sort of a gentle vibe. You
It
could
was a
sort of
gentle
feel.
mocking and an extremely combined with your extremely sensitive temperament.
Yeah, I am a sensitive person. There's no question about that, and I'm starting to realize that I don't have to apologize about that, or at least I just have to be mindful of it. And yeah, so I'm someone who can feels things pretty sharply and deeply. Um, uh, and yeah, I don't want to over. Ian wasn't like, what the fuck are you doing? Like it wasn't anything that extreme. But I'm doing something different, and I'm making music that is more um, detailed and feminine, probably, than um, the peers around me who are, DC music is valued. I mean, the best of DC music, go-go and punk, is valued for raw, its rawness, and I love that shit too. And I love the feeling of tactility and organic truth that is in the best of punk music. Um, and certainly Ian's work uh, exemplifies that. Um, and I have the highest opinion of it. Um, but I'm doing something different, And it took some confidence. I mean, I have to say, I have to give Mark credit. I don't know if Mark will. I hope Mark will hear this. But I love that guy so much, and he's such an important person. When I think about it, I even get choked up because he was like, "I believe in what you're doing," and it's like artists need to hear that shit sometimes.
Absolutely.
Um,
I was just talking about how the whole record business is built on that need for validation from artists. And in the worst case, it's the business takes advantage of that. And in the best cases, like, Discord, for example, it fosters confidence or it fosters support.
yeah, I mean, and I don't want to be misunderstood in the sense that Ian has always been someone who has believed in me and cared about what I'm doing and engaged with it very deeply. And, he got behind it by putting out my music for a long time. And, um, and I'm eternally grateful for him. And I think that I'm much, much stronger artist than a lot of people who don't have Ian MacKaye as a um, spiritual cornerstone. Uh, I think
Well,
it's
I mean, look,
you
I
know
was just talking to Flea yesterday, who's one of the most commercially successful rock artists of all
sure,
time, and Ian is one of his cornerstones too. I mean, Ian's
yeah,
influence reaches far and wide.
yeah, absolutely.
But
So
but I want to
I don't
get.
want to
I don't
be
think anybody's going
misunderstood.
to misunderstand what you're saying. I mean, it's just I think the fact that he was so supportive to you made it that much more tenuous when you were starting to step away aesthetically into new territory for yourself.
That is exactly it, and it just takes some confidence to do different shit. I mean, there's just no question that you have to have and sort of intrinsic self belief as an artist in general, but certainly when you're an artist who is diverging from what people expect or want of you. And there's no way. No, I mean, actually a very stubborn person. In addition to being sensitive, I'm stubborn. I'm stubborn as fuck. And um, so there was no way, you know, even if Ian had been incredibly derisive about what I was doing, uh, I still would have done it. I mean, let's be real. I still would have done it. It just what probably would have been harder to do it, But there's no stopping me. Um, but I'm also paradoxically, I'm also the guy that didn't release that record for 10 years. I'm 10 years older, and people are just now hearing that record, and look at it. 10 years later, people are now telling me it's futuristic. It's 10 years old. It's what?
It's almost as if your neurotic mind and your creative mind have equal sway over your actions, Chad.
I mean, yes. I hope that I don't. Have you interviewed Devin yet? Have you talked to Devin yet?
He has an invitation. He's busy right now, but I will talk to him. Devin Ocampo.
Yeah, you should definitely talk to him. Um, Devin's, Devin and I have been working together and collaborating on and off for 20 years now, and we have
more than 20 years.
More than 20 years, yeah, more than 20 years, and we have an intense dynamic, and he's very critical of me, and there's many aspects of my personality that I think are very challenging to collaborate with. I mean, probably some of them have even made themselves evident in the last 20 minutes of this interview. I have a strong personality, and I get ideas in my head, and I follow them, and it's difficult to talk me out of things, and I make sometimes really foolish choices. But I basically, the very least, I'm an authentic artist, and I think Devin knows that. And Devin himself is also an authentic artist, and that I think is why we have done strong work.
Well, let's go back a little bit, Chad.
Sure.
What is your earliest memory?
My earliest memory, like as a person?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. I don't know if this probably doesn't count as an earliest memory. This is the one that comes to mind though. I had a friend. I was on a beach when I was I think 5 years old. This is starting to feel like therapy or something. And I was on a beach, and my friend Roger, I had a friend whose name was Roger, was we were kids playing in the sandbox or playing in the sand at the beach, and Roger looked out at the sea, and he said, "Yes, indeed." He said the words, "Yes, indeed." This is an early memory.
Said that?
What'd you say?
He was a little kid at the time?
Yes, he looked out at this. He looked out at the water. The wind was blowing. And I mean, you asked me about first memory. I mean, yeah. I have literally. I mean, this is just what comes to mind because I think about this sometimes, and I actually remember that he sang a little tune, and it was like this. I was wondering what song he was singing.
Back now, going to the park.
I was wondering what song he was singing because he sings. What was it? Yes, indeed. It's just two notes. but it's isn't that weird to like this other 5-year-old kid just looked out at the ocean and sang these two notes, and it seemed like it was coming from some children's song that he remembered or something like that. So that's I'm going to call that my earliest memory.
See, because when you first said that to me, I was picturing this 5-year-old kid, Roger, saying, "Yes, indeed," in a world-weary sense, and then pulling out a cigarette and lighting up.
No, it was actually quite positive and beautiful. It was like, look at this, look at the ocean. Yes, indeed.
almost sounds like something you would put on a tombstone in like a Vonnegut novel. Yes, indeed. Like that would go on Kilgore Trout's tombstone and something.
Yeah, sure. So do you ask everyone like what their earliest memory is?
I
Is
ask
there
lots of
is there
people. Um,
um what makes you ask that question?
I think it just brings. I'm not interested in the mechanics of how people create music as much as I'm interested in the inspiration behind it. So I like going back as far as possible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Word. It's interesting. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Um,
Well, to lighten things up, both of our dads died in the last year.
yeah,
But tell me
yeah.
about your dad. I mean, I don't really know much about him beyond what you've shared with me and posted on social media, but he sounds like he was a pretty remarkable person. I know that he was at one point James Baldwin's attorney.
No, that's my mom
Oh,
actually,
that's your
believe it.
mom. Okay, so tell me about your parents.
Both my parents were, I the dramatic word would be civil rights avatars. That would be the most dramatic thing that I could say about them. Avatar would be is a strong word, and is probably a little much. Uh, but it's the word that I think of when I think of certainly when I think of my dad. Um, uh, he was um, a civil rights lawyer who was very instrumental in transforming the country in the 20th century. He ended up actually being Martin Luther King's lawyer. Um, he was an ingenious and very brave person. When when my old band, Smart Went Crazy, the first band that I had with Devin, would go on tour, and we'd go to the South, um, or we would tour down south. And this is in the '90s. Um, uh, my dad once said, I forget what I told him. I was telling him the itinerary of what towns we were going to play, and he said once over dinner, "I was shot at there once," and that became this sort of running joke with me and him. Um, that anytime I would say I'm going to somewhere in the South, the joke was I was shot at there once, and it became this sort of phrase. But he was. I mean, it was it was a joke, but it was for real. He was part of he was a vanguard of the civil rights movement. He was in the vanguard of the civil rights movement. He was part of changing this country for the better, and that's something that I that's my background, and it's why I kind of I feel like no matter what I do in my life, I'm never going to be as amazing as my dad. And uh, I mean, I could seriously, I look the next Beauty Pill record, and I want it to be amazing, and I hope that it is. But no, what I my life in art, it can never impact. It can never compare to the impact, uh, the site, the way that my dad reshaped the world, and everyone in his generation that fought for the things that he fought for. And that's something that it's there's obviously a progressive social aspect of my writing. I'm interested in empathy. There's a song on the describes Beauty Pill describes things as they are album that we released in 2015. There's a song called Stephen and Tawange, and it's about um, a couple, one of whom was trans, and I've never met these people, and I probably never will meet them. But their story was very interesting to me, and I wanted to capture some of their humanity, try to capture some of their humanity in a song. And I think um, that is probably not a normal uh, like indie rock impulse. You know what I mean? Um, and I think that comes from my that desire to empathize and to be someone who champions empathy is something that it definitely comes from my parents and very specifically my dad.
And your mom was also an attorney.
Yes, my mom is also pretty amazing. And you know, I mean, being a black woman, again, of her generation and becoming a lawyer at all
How old is she?
is uh,
70s?
late 70s. Yes.
This
Um,
is a time when lots of black people weren't even being admitted into the bar.
oh yeah, it's. I mean, I'm telling you, I grew up with with giants. I mean, I grew up with um, some of the most amazing people. I once had dinner when I was very young, um, uh, uh, with with my parents and James Baldwin, who came over for dinner, and I have this very embarrassing story. I mean, James Baldwin is now to me like one of the most important artists of my life, but at the time I was just a kid. It was towards the end of his life, which of course, I didn't know at the time. Um, and I was just a kid, and I did my impression of Eddie Murphy's um, "Kill My Landlord" sketch, Saturday Night Live sketch. I'm not. This is the fucking truth. I did a very bad impression of Eddie Murphy's very bad impression of black poetry to James Baldwin. And that is my memory of
Did
James
he
Baldwin.
laugh?
Nope, he did not laugh. My parents did not laugh. It was as awkward as you can imagine. And yep, that's my one encounter with James Baldwin. I mean, I would love to have a better story than that.
Well, that's a good
Um,
story.
it's a really humiliating story.
There's nothing to be humiliated about. You were a little kid.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things that it's just like it's a little bit painful. Um, I mean, it was definitely one of those things where you know, I could tell that they were kind of like my parents were like, "What are you doing?" um, but you know, yeah, the short answer about my dad is he was amazing, and I have nothing but respect and love for him.
What was the environment like at home when you were growing up? Was there music on?
You know, I have to say, my mother. This is pretty interesting. Uh, my mother was a pianist. My mom actually is very hearing challenged. She's not deaf now, but she's pretty close to it. And she always was hard of hearing, and but she was a very musical person. Um, I don't remember her directly influencing me musically at all. Um, uh, the bigger influence on me was, to be honest with you, was my dad, who um, sat me down and made me listen to Thelonious Monk records and listen to Beatles records on big 70s clunky headphones. Um, And Beatles records, as I'm sure you know, the stereo versions of those records, which were the ones that we all had in America, um, the stereo is really extreme on Beatles records.
Because
Like
the
the drum,
stereo mixes were almost an afterthought at the time.
yes. And I mean, this is a characteristic of a lot of '60s records. But the drums are all in the left ear, and the bass is in the right, and it is really, really wacky, extreme panning, and sort of dual mono. Um, and I fell in love with the sound of that stuff. What I found, and it's really, I talk about the Beatles a little bit too much. It's a problem for me. Um, but I will briefly say that was a major influence on me, and the Beatles are a major influence on everybody. Obviously, I mean
Well,
everybody
the
has.
interesting thing is lots of the musicians that came out of the same scene as Monk had nothing but derision for the Beatles.
Yes, and vice versa. Isn't that funny? Uh, but yeah, the thing about here's the thing that I loved about Beatles records, is that the way that they mixed them, you could isolate ideas within their music very easily. You could hear all the components that contributed to this magic spell that they were able to make. You could hear the mechanics of it because they would put these things and sort of compartmentalize, and you could hear all the harmonies in your right ear and the melody in your left ear and that kind of thing. Um, and you could argue that it's awkward, but I think I look, here's what I took from it, and it's an important aspect of Beauty Pill. Here's what I took from it. Nobody, if you talk to the average person, like a non-musician, about Beatles records, they have never noticed this. If you talk to your neighbor about Ticket to Ride or whatever Beatles song that they love, they've probably never noticed how bizarre that mix is because it's a magic spell. And I love that uh, uh, you can. They allowed you to glimpse the mechanics, uh, but the spell doesn't get dispelled. And like ostensibly, when you show people how something is put together, it can be bad for the suspension of disbelief. If you see a horror movie where you see the cameraman in one of the shots, it's going to make you suddenly become aware that, oh, this isn't a real horror movie. None of this stuff is really happening. This is just fictional bullshit. And um, and because I can see a cameraman in the window of the bathroom or whatever. But the Beatles had such strong and charismatic music that it didn't matter that you could analyze it in the way that I spent analyzing it. Um, and in fact, the fact that you could understand the mechanics made the magic of it even more intense. I'm more in love with the Beatles music than most people because I spent a lot of time thinking about it and noticing how it was put together. And um, that's to me a very radical thing, and it's a big part of Beauty Pill. We
Mm-hmm.
recorded the 2015 record. Beauty Pill describes things as they are, as a public exhibit where we allowed people to watch us in a museum recording, and that was to me an example of transparency. I'm pretty confident at this point as an artist. And I don't know where I stand. I don't know whether I have a commercial future. I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know, but I feel very strongly that, and I have a belief in the intrinsic value of the art, and I believe that even if I show you how I put something together, the shit is still dope, and I think a Beatles influence.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's basically an underlying concept that unites lots of great art throughout several media. This idea that the underlying magic is greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, a simple example is if you go to a great bakery, you see people in the back making bread from three things: water, yeast, and flour.
Yeah.
And the difference between a magically amazing baguette and just an average one is not necessarily determined by the components, but it's something beyond that.
Yeah.
And you can understand the words that somebody like James Baldwin uses, but his genius is in the way that he uses them in service of an idea.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up James Baldwin. No,
So can we get a couple? Can we hear some of that Eddie Murphy routine now, Chad?
that will never happen in your lifetime or mine. So
Well,
the answer is no.
So I wonder to what extent having parents who had achieved greatness by most measures, to what extent that was a burden and to what extent that was empowering.
I'm going to tell you something about my brother. Um, I am definitely the least impressive member of my family. I have a younger brother whose name is Kamani, and my brother went to MIT and graduated at the top of his class as an engineer in the engineering field, and then he went to Stanford Law to pursue law, like our parents. Uh, and he also graduated at the top of his class there. And he's one of the smartest and most ambitious people you can know. He's actually, there's a thing I want to tell you about him, but I don't think I have permission to talk about it. But he's working on a project. He's working on a project with some very pretty amazing people in hip hop right now. Um, like probably the most amazing people in hip hop on a collaborative company that he's building with them, and that's something he's doing on the side of his job at a law firm. So my family does not fuck around. My family, I'm not going to say that I'm an embarrassment to them. I don't think I'm an embarrassment to them, but I'm not the kid that you, if you're my mom, you're not bragging about your son who makes some records, some obscure records that, no one has heard. I'm definitely,
Are you sure?
yeah, I'm certain of that. I'm certain of that. Um, but I'm,
In your opinion, is it more impressive to attend prestigious schools than it is to build a creative world unto itself, like you're
I
trying to
don't
do?
have, I mean, this is, you're getting a glimpse into what would make me a tricky person to collaborate with from Devin's end. Because I'm going to sort of contradict myself. I mean, I have a tremendous self-belief. I mean, I think that what Beauty Pill is doing, certainly what we've been doing for the last few years, is as strong as music gets. I'm really proud of it. But I don't hold myself. As I said, I just don't think that what I'm doing um, is as tremendous, and I don't expect it to be as as what my dad did with his life. I'm never gonna be even close to that. Um, and
But he
I'm
is
at
the
peace
person
with it.
that put headphones on you and played you the Beatles and Monk.
Yes, yes.
Monk
I mean,
wasn't commercially popular for most of his career. I mean, he did end up on the cover of Time magazine at one point, but you ended up in the top 10 list in Time magazine recently. So you're
So
kind of like Monk, right?
ergo, I'm a pure to Thelonious Monk. Okay.
Well, you weren't on
No,
the
I
cover,
mean,
Chad.
no. Yeah, I gotta get the cover. I gotta keep working, get on the cover. No, I look. I'm proud of what I do. I feel relatively self assured about its value, as I just said to you about. Like I feel like I can show people how what I'm doing is put together. Um, and I'm not afraid of people, seeing the wizard behind the curtain or whatever. That doesn't that even the wizard behind the curtain idea is to me completely ridiculous. So I have a lot of belief and confidence, but I'm not deluded. I'm not. I mean, the my father's memorial service was scheduled for April. Is going to be at the university where he taught, uh, and it's being moved for obvious reasons because of the CV-19. Um, so it's going to be postponed to the fall. But I guarantee you, anybody doing a summation of my dad's life, um, I mean, we're not. I'm not in the same category. It's just a reality. It's just a reality.
What are you excited about right now?
Um, well, uh, Aaron Nelson. Aaron Nelson is exciting to me. Aaron Nelson joined my band about a year and a half ago. The first recorded work that bears her imprint is this new record, which is called "Please Advise." Uh, it's an EP. It almost has enough songs to be an LP, but it's really just an EP. We are doing something unusual with it, in that the four different formats of the record, the digital, the vinyl, the CD, and the cassette, all have slightly different music. So everyone, whatever version you get, it will have a different character. Um, so it's kind of more than a normal EP. But anyway, Erin has been a transformative figure for me. She joined our band. Gene Cook, um, uh, who Erin replaces, was a Brooklyn musician, um, who was pretty amazing, or she still is pretty amazing. Um, but it was very challenging working with her, at a logistic level, because we're a DC band and she lives in Brooklyn. And so the logistics of even getting together and having practice, were kind of always a constant drag. And there was always this consternation about schedule. And, the people in my band are in their late 30s and 40s. And, um, we have adult lives. And it was just, the stress of it was just kind of too much. There were some other, tensions, I think artistic tensions with Gene. But primarily it was logistical, sort of like it just started becoming depressing for everyone. So Gene left, we parted ways, and Aaron has replaced her, and Aaron is now by far the most well-liked member of my band. I keep saying this to everyone. Um,
Well,
I
it
think
might be
Aaron is
because she's the new person, right?
it's possible. Look, possible that it's because she's the new person, and it's reasonable to have that conjecture that she's the she's the new girl, and that kind of thing. But I don't think so. I think it's she has a special energy. She's very humble, and just kind of wants to do good work and wants to be positively, wants to contribute positively, and everyone can feel it. And she's sort of no bullshit. And she just wants to get in and make things better. And she wants the band to be better, and she wants us to move forward. And everyone can feel it, and everyone respects her because of it. She's very plain spoken in this way. She's not a pretentious person at all. She's very intelligent, but she's not interested in complicating things. And I would say you could, anyone in my band, you could ask about Erin, and they will have positive feelings about her. Whereas everyone else in my band, like I'm not. I think my band knows that I'm a creative person and knows that I am the generator of songs and a lot of our creative ideas. Um, and I think they like me. I think they care about me. But I'm sure that they have more mixed feelings about me than they have about Erin. And that would probably be the case for anyone in my band. Um, we're all
Including
adults and we have.
yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, look, Devin Ocampo is, no, to me, no question. I mean, this might seem extreme, but to me, there's no question that Devin's a musical genius. I genuinely think that is an accurate accurate trope for Devin, that he is a musical genius. As much of a hoary cliche as that is, I think it applies to him. But it's hard working with that dude. It's hard. Uh, and he's intense, and he's very critical, and he is pretty mercurial and moody, and he has a lot of characteristics that, a lot of pretty famous geniuses have. Um, he's unfortunately not famous, but
Why is that
he's.
unfortunate?
I look. My personal belief is that Devin. It's quite simple. Devin should be famous. People should know him. I mean, Devin should be as well known. I mean, I think that Devin. Here's the amazing thing about Devin.
Well, all
This
I'll say is like I'm not disagreeing with you, but lots of the famous geniuses that I've encountered, have expressed that fame wasn't so good for them.
maybe so. Maybe so. Look, I don't actually regard fame as a goal. But I think my esteem for Devin is this. I think Devin is, as a guitarist, on par with Robert Fripp, and as a drummer, not that far off from Stuart Copeland. I mean, that both of those themes, both of those statements are extreme and hyperbolic, and I recognize they're maybe seem a little insane, but I do actually believe that they're not that far off. And to be both of those things, I was saying, this is the way I feel about Devin. I actually just did an interview about this, and I realized it's true. Devin doesn't play trumpet, but I feel, as far as I know, he's never picked up a trumpet.
Yeah,
But I
yeah
feel
he
like,
has.
okay, well, maybe he has. I don't
I
know.
think he played
My
it on the Farrakhan album.
Okay, all right. Well, I take it back. That actually proves my point. But I'm trying to think of a clarinet or whatever.
Right.
If I handed Devin a clarinet, having never played it before in his life, I feel like within a few hours he'd sound like a clarinetist. And I think that is not a normal level of talent. And I think it's unfortunate that he's not better known. Um, And I have very, very high esteem for Devin, maybe even higher esteem for Devin than Devin has of himself. Um, I think he's amazing, and I think that I think the fact that he has worked in sort of obscure for as long as he has, this is my personal opinion. Um, I feel like it is. I feel like there has. In my opinion, I feel like there's been a psychic toll. I think it's hard to be Devin all your life. People telling you you're radically amazing, and yet the world is not rewarding you in the way that the world often rewards amazing people. I feel like it's reasonable. It would be reasonable. I'll put this in a conjectural frame. It would be reasonable for Devin to become a bitter person, and uh, like I would, it would not be insane. You would not be like, how did he end up bitter? That would not be a big mystery. I mean, being that talented, I have no idea what it's like. I'm not that talented. But being that talented, uh, and not getting, let's look what I said about earlier about Marcus Kidd. Mark actually was an instrumental figure in my life by telling me, I like what you're doing with technology. I think And the Word is amazing, and I want you to keep going. And encouragement, we're all humans. Devin is a sensitive person. It's nice to be encouraged. The times that I have like, I'm gonna let's be, we're just let's talking about me for a second. I made a record which is pretty highly regarded and is on a lot of people's top 10 lists for that year, and is on Time Magazine's top 10 of the decade. And I'm going to be real. It's nice. It's nice. It's nice. It's nice when people say nice things to you. We're all human beings. It's nice to have people affirm what you're doing and say, look, I recognize its value. We were told at some point that the album was being considered for Grammy nomination uh, for sound and production and for design, I guess, like technical Grammys. I don't know anything about the Grammys. I'm a DC punk dork or whatever. I don't know anything about the music industry, and I don't understand how the nomination process works or who the committees are, how any of that works. And suddenly I was being told, there were whispers like, "Oh, you know what? You're in some kind of consideration for these Grammys." And I remember, I remember. Here's what happened to me, and this is just the reality. Here's what happened to me psychologically. I had gone from the Grammys are some bullshit, some stupid Milli Vanilli, stupid bullshit industry, whatever, to being so flattered. being oh, they recognize. Oh, this is very nice, and it totally affected my esteem, my self esteem. I
So
don't
what is
want it.
that? What
I
did
would
you
like.
take away from that?
It was exciting to feel like without trying. I mean, I certainly would. It's certainly nothing that I would do on purpose. It was exciting to feel like without trying, I had done something that people in an entirely different world that was so strong that people in an entirely different world were able to recognize its merit. And again, I'm a human being, and I would like to. I mean, I would like to say like I don't give a shit about the Grammys,
Why?
but then, well, because it's a cooler thing to say, don't you think? I
Right.
would
And
like.
it also comes from the place where, the underlying assumption is that it's ridiculous to give out awards for artistic merit since the merit of art is so subjective.
Yeah, which is true. Which is true. I mean,
But both things can be
I
true. It's also nice to receive acclaim, and it also serves the purpose of increasing awareness of your music.
yeah, I mean, like from a commercial standpoint, I would love to have a Grammy. From a like the way the label, like people were explaining to me, like this will have direct consequence on your income, and that was exciting to me, and it would still be exciting to me.
And what I've realized is that in many cases, people that win Grammys spend as much energy, or people on their behalf are spending as much energy or more than what was put into actually creating the work. It's an extension of the whole process, for
See that
better or
part,
worse.
the thing is, you're in LA and I'm not, and I so that I don't really have a glimpse into. In fact, it was one of the the weird aspects of the moment. Alan Formello, um, the guy who owned our label, complete dick, and one of the probably a person that I can genuinely say that I loathe with every ounce of my being. Um, now, he owned the label, the tiny label that released that record, and he just completely flipped out about the idea of Grammy nominations, and he insisted that we launch a Grammy campaign. Um, and I had no idea what that was, or how appropriate it was, or like what. I just didn't know anything about that. And of course, that the fact that I didn't know anything about it added to his kind of constant derision of me as an artist, for being from the DC punk scene and not being a music biz pro or whatever, which was our dynamic. But anyway, Alan insisted that we start reaching out to people, potential Grammy voters. I'm going to say, is it the Academy? Is it the Academy? It's not. That's the movies, right?
No, I
It's
think
not
it's
the.
the Academy for audio as well, for Grammys.
Okay, so yeah, and so I have a few friends that have won Grammys. My friend Chris Shaw. Do you know Chris Shaw?
No, I don't.
Okay, Chris Shaw is a producer engineer. You would know he's worked. He's produced the last few. Produced and recorded the last few Bob Dylan records.
Hmm.
He was the engineer for the first Weezer record, the big hit Weezer record. And he has worked with Wilco. I think he did Ghost is Born. He's done all this amazing stuff. He's a very talented and accomplished producer. He happens to be a Beauty Pill fan, and we got to know each other. And he's won Grammys. And my friend Joel Hamilton, an amazing producer and engineer in Brooklyn, has won Grammys. And also the woman who masters our record, Emily Lazar, at the Lodge in New York. She's won Grammys, and so I was able to reach out to them and say, "Hey, Alan is putting this intense pressure on me to mount a Grammy campaign, and that feels totally awkward and uncomfortable to me. And almost everything Alan asks me to do is awkward and uncomfortable to me, but this certainly feels like one of them." And I asked them, do you do that? Like, if you learn that you're nominated or you're being considered for nomination, do you respond and mount a Grammy campaign? And they were all like, you know what? I wouldn't, don't bother. Don't do that. Um, some people do it, and some labels certainly put energy into it um, on behalf of the artist. But it's not a good use of your time, or possibly could be damaging to your reputation if you are if you if you sort of come off pushy and you don't know what you're doing. Um, and and if it's not natural to you, basically they dissuaded me from doing it, and my impression is that they don't do it. I think as working professionals in audio, they're very happy to to be nominated for a Grammy. I mean, it's very, very good for their business. And it probably feels good emotionally too. But I don't think that they ever those were people who sought it out or mounted a campaign for it. And in our case, it was people. It was really rumors. Um, People started telling us, "Hey, you're being considered. You're being talked about." Um, and for me, it was. I mean, think about where I came from. I was in Smart Went Crazy, an arty band with a cello that was thought to be a sort of was the Discord band that a lot of people who love Discord didn't like at the time. Um, and uh, like here I am. I made a record where people are talking about I should be winning a Grammy. Like that was crazy to me. Uh, and the only reason I brought this up really was to talk about Devin, which is to say, I think it's understandable if someone like Devin in my opinion, has had some psychic pain from not being appreciated. I think that's reasonable.
When comes the shaking man, a nation in his eyes, striped with blood and blaze, tattoo, streaking cathedral spire. They say, they say.
Do you think that the responsibility ends once the album is finished and it's exclusively the domain of the record label or a publicist or just the people and the general public to hear and appreciate what you've made, or is promoting it an extension of making the work?
We did when we did Immersive Ideal. Immersive Ideal was the name for the multi-stage art installation project that created the album. Beauty Pill describes things as they are, and the second stage of the project. The first stage of the project was we recorded in a gallery, visible and audible to people behind glass, and we the and so people could we tried to do one song per day. We would listen to a demo that I had written, that I had made at home on a boombox in the middle of the room, and we would people would vote on whether it was the song of the day that we wanted to work on, and the band would get to work on learning how to play it. And because they're very cool people, by nightfall they would usually have some kind of version of it that sounded pretty good, and we recorded, and that was our process for a little more than 2 weeks. And then when that record was completed, we had a second exhibit, which was an installation where we played the completed record in surround on speakers in the same room where we recorded. So there was all this sort of meta level of, I don't know, I was going to say discourse, but that's not the right word. And showed this sort of interactive photo array of the making of that record. So people could come into a room and hear the album in surround sound, and look at photos on on 3 screens of the making of that record. And uh, and it was a pretty awesome installation. It was very satisfying, and people freaked out. Like, the people that came to that installation really responded very strongly and seemed to really love it. Um, and to me, emotionally, that was the release of the record. I could stop right there. I mean, I was not very motivated to release a record in a formal sense, because going into it, I don't have a lot of. I have this idea based on my history with Discord, of seeing myself as not a very commercially. I don't have this high expectation of money from my records. So, like, it was just, to me, the surround installation was the release, and everyone who came to see it, that was enough for me. And my band did not feel that way at all. They were very proud of the music and very excited by people's response. And they were like, well, imagine what could happen if we made a record of this and really got it out in the world. And I was like, yeah, it's cool, but a few hundred people came and they were really into it, you and that was enough for me. Some people in DC that stopped by an installation, that was enough for me. And it wasn't enough for my bandmates. And so they were frustrated with me that I wasn't very highly motivated about getting it out. And honestly, that kind of thing delayed the actual release of the record in a commercial sense for really like a good 2 years. And it was a pretty frustrating 2 years for the band. And my bandmates have endured multiple periods of me being a weirdo in this way. So, I mean, Aaron just had to deal with the video that we just released for Pardon Our Dust, the video that stars Aaron and features her lead vocal. We finished that record almost 2 years ago. And poor Aaron, has been so excited. This is the first time she's on a record. She's wanting people to hear it. This is the first time she's been in a band. It's very exciting, and she's fired up, and she wants the world to hear it. And at the time, I was recovering from kind of PTSD from the label from the label I just told you about. And so it took me a long time to even figure out how to proceed. I was not sure I'd even trust working with another label. And the short answer to that is we ultimately found Northern Spy Records out of Brooklyn, and that relationship has been very, very positive. And they're putting the record out, but it took a long time for me to make that happen. And so the whole thing of the question of the artist's responsibility in terms of promoting and getting the work to reach people is one that is a bit key for me, because I'm a pretty unusual character in this respect. Like, as I just told you, I'm so excited about making another album with Beauty Pill. But what I'm excited about is not I'm not I don't picture a big stadium full of people freaking out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have rock and roll dreams in that way. Like, it's not been the driving force for me reaching a wide audience. It's just
But
not
you
been
are
the
talking
thing.
about the psychic toll that laboring in obscurity can take on an artist.
Yes.
So there's got to be like there must be, if not like a dream of filling a stadium, is there a desire for something in between obscurity and a stadium?
Absolutely. I would like to be. I would absolutely like to be more popular. And the times the the experiences I've had with lots of people getting excited about this music has been very encouraging and very positive. Just in the last week, I don't know if did you hear the 99% Invisible
No, not
podcast?
yet.
Okay, so Roman Mars, um, there's podcast. It's an amazing podcast called 99% Invisible. It's largely about design, and Roman Mars is the host and the main writer, and he just did an episode called Roman Mars Describes Things as They Are. And in the episode,
Which is
he
a
is
reference
walking
to your
around.
album.
Yes, it's a direct. He asked for our permission. He's a very big fan. I mean, I have. This is one nice thing about Beauty Pill. We're not a famous band, but the people that like us tend to be creative people, sometimes extraordinary people, and some of them are famous, and we've benefited from that. Um, uh, and he's, which I'm very grateful for. I'm like to have someone like Roman, uh, you know, decide to name a podcast after your album is just an amazing thing. Um, but here's the thing: you really should listen to it. It's only a few minutes long. It's like 15 or 20 minutes long. It's pretty amazing. And but his whole thing is he's talking about quarantine, and he's talking about shelter in place, and he's talking about social distancing, and all of these things that everyone is talking about now. The podcast, the premise of his podcast is I'm walking around my house because I have no choice because I'm stuck in my house like everyone else. And so I'm going to walk around my house and describe the things in my house. And I'm going to give you this, and he gives a beautiful, detailed history about the various ordinary objects in his house. And it's very characteristic of his particular gift and his particular intellect that he's able to do this. He goes into the chemical makeup of soap and why all soap, uh, uh, um, basically how all soap works, not just antibacterial soap or specialized soap. The chemical makeup of soap and why it does what it does, which I'd never known anything about that before. And it's an amazing episode, but it's pretty dry and uh, design oriented. But at the end, he plays a Beauty Pill song. He plays the song "Exit Without Saving," and he plays it in its entirety. And then he makes a plea to his audience that my health and my vulnerability is why everyone should social distance. It's because of people like Chad Clark. And he says this in his podcast, and it's incredibly moving. And he's like, my friend Chad Clark, I want him to keep making music. I want him to make music all of his life, and I want his life to be long. And I need you to commit to social distancing so we can flatten the curve for people like Chad who are vulnerable, people who are sick, people who are older, all the people that CV-19 can easily victimize. And he uses me as the reason. It's so heavy. He did not prepare me that he was going to do this. All he told me was, I want to do a themed podcast called Roman Mars Describe Things as They Are. And I thought that was a cute idea. And I said, I really like him and I like his podcast. So I said, yeah, go ahead. And I give you permission and do whatever you want. And then he comes with his very emotional podcast. It's just amazing. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that the dude has a very wide audience. He's very highly esteemed. I think he has something like 100,000 Twitter followers, and people think very highly of him. And I would say his audience genuinely loves him. He's an amazing guy. And as a result of this exposure and of his very obvious passion, we have this sudden influx of new listeners who are excited and are just hearing about Beauty Pill, and they're just hearing describes things as they are for the first time. And they're buying it on Bandcamp, and they're streaming it on Spotify or whatever. And they're very excited, and they're writing lots of emails. They're analyzing the lyrics. The nature of podcast audiences, probably like your own, is that they tend to be the smarter, more thoughtful, more sensitive people, I would say. And so they're really getting into the music. They're really paying attention because they also have a lot of time because they're just walking around their damn house. Like,
well, Chad,
we all are.
No offense to Rome and Mars, but get ready for the floodgates to really open once this drops.
Say it again?
No offense to Rome and Mars, but get ready for the floodgates to really open once this podcast drops.
Yeah. Well,
I'm kidding, because obviously Roman's show is a lot bigger than ours, and it's a great show.
Look.
But here's something I want to talk about.
Every musician I know loves your show.
Well,
everyone talks about it. So
we're like the Beauty Pill of podcasts.
Yeah,
but to your point that you might not have a giant following, but that your followers are like-minded, creative people, and your music seems to have a dramatic effect on many of their lives. I was just thinking about the first time we met, Chad, which was about 22 years ago. It was in April of 1998, and I was in a weird band in high school called Acarso, and we were getting back to our hometown, Milwaukee, after our first tour. And our very last show of the tour was with Smart Went Crazy and Farrakhet and another band from Milwaukee. And anyway, meeting you and Devin and Hillary and Jeff, meeting all of you really changed the trajectory of my life in a major way that's identifiable. I mean, if I think about even what's most important to me creatively right now, which is an album I made, the producer of it was Mary Timony, whom I met years later through Devin.
That's another total genius. But
everything about that day, I can still remember it vividly, but it also, it has affected my life up until this moment, and for that I am very grateful.
See, this is the thing. Thank you for saying that, and I love you.
I love you too.
And it means a lot to me.
I hope that you are healthy and happy for another 40 years.
Thank you, man. Thank you. That is what you just said to me. That's the real currency of life. That's the real currency of life. When you asked, I don't know if you were being facetious, but you asked yesterday on Twitter, what do Beauty Pill fans have? What questions do they have? And one of them was a young musician who looks up to me. I think that, or at least that's certainly what his response seems to suggest. And he's asking me for advice on how to. He says, you've done a lot of things where you've worked on art installations, and you've worked in theater, and you've worked on film, and you do all of these things, and you stay creative, and you seem to make a living. And he asked me for advice, and my first thought, and it was an impulse to be like, dude, you have no idea. If you have this idea that I'm someone you should aspire towards, that is a complete misapprehension. That was my first thought, which is to say, get out of here.
Yeah,
But
but
then I
that's
thought,
the same as when someone comes up to you after a show and says that they enjoyed it, and then you disparage their compliment.
totally no,
It's not
and
productive.
I totally, and that's what I'm trying to say is, my second thought was, look, wait, let me not be a dick about it, and let me understand that this is a person asking a tender, serious question, and maybe it's based on how they perceive me, and maybe that is slightly off base, but this is someone I should take seriously and honor their question. Um, uh, but people, I'm not a famous person, but I get, people are very kind to me. I feel like, I'll give you my succinct answer, or my as succinct as I can be. I'm not very good at being succinct, as I think is pretty obvious at this point. Um, but I'll give you I'll try to give a concentrated answer to that guy who asked on Twitter, for advice. I would say, for me, and this is just for me, that it has been true that the fact that I stayed in DC and haven't left, I haven't gone to LA, haven't gone to Chicago, haven't gone to Seattle or Nashville or, Brooklyn or New York or whatever. I haven't moved to Paris or London. I've stayed in DC, um, which runs counter to almost all the advice you're going to get from most people, which is to move where the action is, and as an artist, that's what artists do. Historically, artists have always done that, and almost all of our heroes, at some point, moved towards closer to some kind of social energy that they thought was going to carry them forward in their career. I haven't done that. I've stayed in DC. I love DC, and I love the DC creative community. And it's not a large community. It's not a bustling community in the way that probably exists in Brooklyn, where there's a lot of sort of creative professionals, um, like there probably are where you live. And so it doesn't have that character, but it does have a valid character. And my life has not been like Ian MacKaye, in the sense that, like, nobody's Ian MacKaye, but I'm certainly not Ian MacKaye. But I feel like I have not moved, and that's contributed to the character of my life, and the fact that I'm able to do what I'm doing is I've cultivated. I try to be. I mean, my ambition. Beauty Pill had a meeting a few years ago, and everyone in the band was frustrated and weren't getting along, and there are a lot of tensions about what people wanted from the band and what their expectations were. And we went around a table and we were asked, what do you want from Beauty Pill? And my thing was, I want to be a resource for Washington D.C. I like the idea that we're valued by our community, and we're embraced by our community, and we contribute to our community, in an organic and direct way. And I would like to be known, of course, as something certainly, like, my loftiest aspiration, and it's a ridiculous aspiration, but the loftiest ambition I would have is to one day be regarded in the way that people see Sam Gilliam or Fugazi or Chuck Brown, DC institutions that really advanced the culture, and did innovative shit that everyone can recognize and everyone loves. And I, of course, would love to be, loved by the rest of the world. Of course, I would love that. But my loftiest ambition would be to continue to work here in DC. I may, a year from now, you might find that I've completely changed direction and I've totally moved wherever. I'm not saying like I'm here forever no matter what. But I do think that it has contributed to my strength as an artist, that I don't mix in a Brooklyn hip crowd, or a Silver Lake hip crowd or whatever the fuck. Like that's not my life. And my life is pretty good. I can't leave my house, but other than that, like I'm doing all right. I'm gainfully employed. I have a record that I'm excited about, and a band that I love, and people say very nice things to me all over the place. And yes, I'm not wealthy, and yes, I'm not, Beautiful is not Radiohead or whatever. But like my life is pretty okay. So I would say that if wherever you are, if I was a young person who is in, I'm gonna say Milwaukee. And I'm not saying that to be provocative about you. Pick some random city. I would say consider staying in your city and being a badass and trying to be a resource for your community and an inspiration for your community, instead of going to the big city that you imagine is going to be awesome and where you're going to make your fortune. I think the choice to go and make your fortune somewhere is totally legitimate and completely normal and totally sane. And what you've done in moving to LA and developing a really, really impressive film scoring career, which, I mean, the one thing I will say to your listeners now is that you have been very important for me, and that you have given me very important advice about film scoring and negotiating, employment terms and figuring out money and budgets and all those things. And those are skills that you got because you did move. So I'm not saying that my point is just that I think the path that I've chosen is a valid path, I guess.
Well, in the spirit of staying in DC, I think we should play a song that I heard you perform 22 years ago at the Globe in Milwaukee, called DC Will Do That to You. And then everybody listening to this should wash their hands for the duration of that song, in the spirit of keeping Chad alive.
I fell beneath the grating of the world. Maybe I was born there. It doesn't really matter now, at least of all to you. I fell beneath the grating of the world, or maybe I was born there. It doesn't really matter now, at least of all to you. You got a cold look in your eye. DC will do that to you.
But Chad, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.